Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here, and I told you he'd be here. It is Joe Pisapia, Joe Pisapia 17 on the Twitter machine, the author of the 16-time best-selling fantasy black book series. He has absolutely changed the game. I told you this off the top of this show, and it's kind of come full circle for me. And the first time I ever talked to Joe was on Anthem Sports and Entertainment on the FanDuel show way back, I think, Joe, 2015, you mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
Boy,
Yeah,
time has flown by.
it has. I had no hair then. I have no hair now, so nothing's changed here. You've got way more of a beard, though. You were just
I
a,
do.
a clean-shaven, fresh-faced youth back then.
I
In
do.
2015, it was a simpler time. But yeah, man, we've been doing shows together for a long time. And then on Anthem, you and I were doing, FNTSY stuff for many years together, and that was a great experience too. And you just can't break us up, which I love. And we are always going to stay together through thick and thin. And I think that says a lot about our friendship and also our love of the games that we cover, which has been fantastic.
Yes, there's so many different ways I can go here with the next three segments with you. You got the baseball podcast, of
Mhm.
course, at Fantasy Pros, which you're calling home runs. We just chatted in the green room before we came on here about that, leading off a great podcast. Just breaking down. I like what you guys do. You and Dan at the start. You kind of recap the day
Mhm.
before, like some three ups and three downs, and then you just take a look at the slate and call some home runs. So that's a fantastic listen if you want to check that out. Of course, the NFL podcast over at Fantasy Pros. Any wrestling fans out there in this ring, and of course, just the Black Book, man. I'm always thrilled when you ask me to be part of it. I'm so happy for the success. And when I said change the game, and when I talked about it off the top, just RPV, revolutionary player evaluation tool, relative position value, absolutely cool. And this is a star-studded lineup. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but Debo's been on this show. You got Tags, you got your Fantasy Pros guys. Nathan Hamilton. This is going to be, as I mentioned at the start, Joe, kind of like a week and a half run here
I
of
love it.
Black Book members. Yeah, to pump this thing and just for people to go check it out. It's so detailed, player profile, very detailed rookie profiles too,
Hmm.
IDP rankings, draft strategies for every single type of league, auction, high stakes, whatever it is, NFL wagering, myself, DFS, division previews, overrated, underrated, and then just things that you go through, quarterbacks you've done, and then just the the detail on all the
Hmm.
players, man. It really is, and updated sheets too, right? For people
Right.
who have gotten the book and unfortunately maybe would have been involved in a guy like Cam Akers.
Yeah, well, yeah, I had to go back to the salt mine yesterday, and I had just done an update for everybody who subscribed to the RPV cheat sheets, and that's the relative position value. So understanding how much better a player is than a certain player at that position, that's kind of the Black Book 101, right? So it's not just rankings, it's not just tiers, it's quantified rankings. And I just did the update Saturday. I felt really good about it. I said, okay, it's off my plate. And then, wouldn't you know it, here we are a couple of days later, had to do it again because of the Cam Akers injury, which certainly does make a dent in RB1, which are he's kind of on that
Yeah.
threshold of RB1, RB2 anyway, depending on what you like, what you don't like. And I was a fan of Cam Akers. I thought his value was pretty much where it should be. The upside was clear with Cam Akers, but I think we're running into a little bit of a problem here with the Darrell Henderson pivot because people want to automatically now anoint him as Cam Akers, and that's not necessarily the case. If he was Cam Akers, he would have been ahead of him on the depth chart. Darrell Henderson was not ahead of Cam Akers on the depth chart for a reason. And it's not because Henderson's bad. He's got great speed. I think the vision sometimes is a problem for him where you watch him run. He doesn't always find the hole. And speed doesn't always make up for everything, but that is something he can get better with more reps. And clearly, he's going to have the opportunity for that too. But I imagine they're going to bring in more help here with the Rams. I think that's something we can all keep an eye on and see what that help is. I don't know if it's going to crush Darrell Henderson's value, but Henderson for me was a player I was taking in a lot of early drafts and a lot of best balls and a lot of early drafting and Scott Fishbowl because I looked at that grouping of running backs like Henderson, Gus Edwards, Jamal Williams, guys who I have faith in that are good running backs that if there was an injury, all of a sudden they would return a greater value. But I struggle with putting him in the top 20 right now. I know a lot of people want to make him all of a sudden a big thing, but I kind of want to shake everybody and remind them, hey, remember a couple of years ago where Kareem Hunt wasn't playing and everybody wanted to make Damian
Yeah.
Williams a star, right? How'd that work out? Right? Not very good. People, I mean, ask Jake Seeley. He's still got some road burn on that. I
So
think
you and I were together on Target. Of course, we were talking about
you
Anthem, and
we
we did a
were.
show. You and I were on the same page when it came to Damian Williams. My goodness, like a lot of people had him ranked as a top 10 running back and RB8. I'm kind of seeing people fall into Henderson as a top 20. And I'm with you. I have him just outside my 20. and we'll get to the Rams and what it because some of their odds have changed and things have
Hmm.
changed. I'd love to just preview the Rams since we're on them here with you, but yeah, Akers I had just outside the top 10, Joe RB 11. It's such a tough injury to come back from too. You don't there's not a lot of guys who have been able to come back from torn Achilles. Like I
Yeah,
hope they
not at
can,
running back
sure.
anyway. That's
Running back is so
wide
challenging.
receiver. You've got a couple of them, but running back is a tough one, and I'm
Yeah.
rooting for him. And we all know medicine's taken some great strides in some of these surgeries. I mean, look at the way guys bounce back from ACLs now. I mean, it's just crazy. It used to be a career-ending injury, and now it's just, well, you'll miss a year and you'll be back next year, maybe better than ever. But yeah, you're right. The Achilles one is concerning from a dynasty standpoint, and
Mhm.
I don't know who the winner is because, people say, well, now, it's better for Stafford's value. I don't know if it is because I always think balance is the key to everything here if you want to
Totally.
run a great offense. So you're kind of lacking a little bit now. And yeah, they've got some other, guys there on this roster, a kid that they drafted too. But I think that's also what you're seeing now is a lot of like, oh, Funk's going to be the guy or this guy's going to be the guy. And they're trying to dig deep because everybody wants to prove that they're the smartest in the room. But at the end of the day, you're not replacing Cam Akers necessarily. Maybe Henderson, from a volume standpoint, is going to become a good return, but I kind of have him. I don't know where you have him. Is in that same grouping of the Miles Sanders, DeAndre
Yeah.
Swift. It's more of that nature than it is. Oh my goodness, he automatically becomes an RB1. I just can't get there. And I love the offense. I love McVay, but I think that's a lot to ask of the player because if the player once again was that transcendent kind of talent, then we wouldn't have been talking about Cam Akers in the first place. And I think it's very lazy fantasy, if you will, to just automatically just say, well, we're going to take this guy and make him this other player right from the jump. And James Robinson's like a unique thing. Like when James Robinson comes out as like the third, fourth string guy and all of a sudden has a great season, it was very volume based, very volume heavy. Also, there wasn't much else to do with that offense but run the football, right? And maybe you get a CJ Anderson years ago who pops up out of nowhere and has a great year, but how often does that follow up? And I think the answer is not very. So be very careful here with Henderson. The value's gone. The
Yeah, all
value
gone.
was drafting him back at, RB 40 something. That ship has sailed. Now you have to really ask yourself a question, what kind of investment do I want to make? And I think as RB 22, 23, somewhere in that range, I think it's feasible. I'd still rather have Travis Etienne personally.
I would too. Absolutely with you there. Yeah, he was. We had Nelson Souza on here last week, high stakes player, and he had Henderson on his squad. I think in that range, like he took AJ Dillon, Henderson, and maybe Gus Edwards. I'm
Mm-hmm.
blanking on the third one, but in around that range of guys that, like you said, they could fall into opportunities and be guys for them. That was like roughly RB 46 over the past 2 weeks in NFFC leagues, and now just there was a draft yesterday I noticed. So Henderson from July 1st to July 19th, just the other day, RB 45 on average, min pick
Mm-hmm.
125, max 168. Yesterday, a draft, I don't know how many, maybe one, maybe two, but I just took the last 24 hours. RB 23, he went as.
It's
That's right in
reasonable.
around that range. That's reasonable, yeah.
Yeah.
The min was pick 48, the max was 55. So in around that, I saw somebody tweet in a Joe's Pros that he went in the fifth round. Could see him go in the third. That's way too rich for me. Even fourth, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I'm into it. Like they drafted Henderson, and it's always exciting when you got a guy like Sean McVay, and you get excited for him because he seems to be excited about a guy they draft. But they also just drafted Cam Akers, right? And he just overtook Henderson, and
Mm-hmm.
some of the numbers were okay for him, like 4.5 yards per carry, okay, 624 rushing yards, 138 attempts, 24 targets, 16 grabs. I think we all figured that he was probably going to be involved through the air a little bit if Cam Akers was fully healthy. Some monster games, but some mediocre ones too, like
Mm-hmm.
15 for 60. You don't care about that. 10 for 19, like one big one, 114, but he had 20 carries. So he is in around that range where you mentioned Miles Sanders, Dave Montgomery. We'll talk about a little bit. He's in that range. Josh Jacobs. I think I'd rather all those guys here than Henderson. Xavier Jones, one kid that you talked about, is on the squad. 13 games last year with the Rams. Just like one kick return. Really didn't do a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot. Debro seems to like him quite a bit. Raymond Calais out of Louisville, a Buck seventh round pick in 2020. Pretty quick, but doesn't seem like a guy who can carry the ball 10 plus times. But he is. You mentioned ETN, just two running backs with 100 plus carries and 7.8 yards per carry. So I guess he's in that ballpark. Pretty crazy. And then fucking Anderson. So there doesn't seem to be too much there. Before we break and talk more about the Rams here, Gurley, Bell, AP, Duke, Deion Lewis, McCoy. Do those
Wait.
guys do anything? Like, ugh, right?
Oh
Would
my God.
they said
What a
yesterday? I think McVay said he's not in a rush to grab a vet. But it would be funny if Gurley and kind of come full circle for us and for Gurley to go back with that Ram squad.
I don't know. I mean, I guess
We
that's the
have anything
logical
to
thing. He
offer.
understands the playbook, but that
Yeah.
is like the running backs of the ghosts of running backs past. I just got chills when you mentioned all of those guys, and I want to dial it back to 5 years ago when they were
Right
useful,
for
but
it.
they're not right now. And that's maybe give Le'Veon Bell one more shot and see what's in that tank, but it did not look very good
No, it
last
didn't.
year with Kansas City. So I don't think it should be any of those guys. I would be watching to see if somebody else gets jettisoned from another roster here during cuts, and maybe they add some depth that way. I bet they would love to have Malcolm Brown back too, but that
Yes.
ship has sailed too. But keep an eye on that. I don't think any of these veterans are a good fit really for what they want to do. Plus, remember they have no cap burn. This team is a cap disaster. So and they don't have a lot of picks to move either. So that's a bad combination to bring in some depth. So they might have to be kind of scrounging or get clever here. But keep an eye out. They're going to add somebody. I just don't know who yet.
Yeah, I don't know either. They got to add somebody. They're all in, as you mentioned. I mean, up against the cap, and they've given up so many picks over the years. They've gone from 13-1 to 14-1 to win the Super Bowl. So we'll continue to talk the Rams, some of their skill position players, where they're going in drafts, see if Joe is liking any of them, and if this team is indeed a Super Bowl contender. So we'll talk about the Rams, also about Dave Montgomery and T. Higgins when we return here on Mean Streets on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network as part of Anthem Sports and Entertainment. Chris Meaney and Joe Pisapia. Joe Pisapia 17 on the Twitter machine. Myself at Chris Meaney. Any questions at any time, Joe will answer them. He is great on social media. So we were talking about Henderson, where he's going. I think we're on the same page here. I don't know how many shares I'm going to have of this guy moving forward, and I'm not completely sold on him, but the Rams, things have changed just a little bit from their standpoint. They're now plus 195 to win the NFC West. They were 13-1 to win the Super Bowl. It's now just 14-1. Their win total hasn't changed, 10.5. Of course, they brought in Matthew Stafford. He's quarterback 11, ADP 87 over the last 2 weeks at NFFC. Robert Woods is wide receiver 15, ADP 39. Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 29, ADP 52. And as mentioned, Henderson in that draft yesterday. It could have been one or two drafts, but over the last 24 hours, dude has an ADP of RB 23 and 50 overall. And then Tyler Higbee's in there as well. Starting to get a little bit of steam moving up draft boards. I've noticed, Joe, 10 ADP 111. How do you think this offense is going to look with Matthew Stafford under center?
Much better.
Yeah,
Honestly, I
he
do.
is.
Get Jared Goff, bless his heart. Just too many mistakes. I mean, he would just throw balls too, where you're like, why are you throwing that ball now there? And so much of that where you're just taking yourself out of opportunities. And people were, once upon a time, a couple of years ago, Todd Gurley's performance kind of masked a little bit of some of the error-prone mistake football that you would see from Jared Goff because he would just have a run or a breakaway or things like that, and it all would be cured. But once you took that element away from the offense, all of a sudden you started to expose Jared Goff a little bit more, and then obviously we know the rest is history. So Matthew Stafford's a quarterback that just really has not gotten enough credit, I think, in his career. He's always played for the most part on bad teams. He's played for so many different coaches and coordinators and all those things over the years to have him at this stage in his career with the knowledge that he has, hopefully the back is okay. That's the only thing I'm ever concerned with Stafford because back injuries are very tough. But if he's healthy enough, he's got a great complement of weapons. You mentioned Kupp and Woods, but I'm also very high on Van Jefferson, who I think you could see kind of emerge. The coaching staff loved this kid last year. You saw him in the playoffs and in December a little bit, and a lot of buzz about him. I think he's super talented. And Kupp's been a guy that's missed a fair amount of time over the last few years. Let's not forget that. So if you're in very deep leagues, Van Jefferson would be a player I would be paying close attention to. Higbee, I struggle with to get there. And I feel like what everybody wants to do every year is they try to pick a couple tight ends that they want to make happen, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's Trey Burton,
Oh,
a couple years ago, remember his first year in Chicago? Well, that didn't work out. We kind of go through this list every year of these guys. And I feel like Troutman now is this guy that they feel like, oh, this is the guy. This is the guy. We'll see. We'll see how that ends up. But Higbee, I think, as one of the strategy I like to employ, which is it's kind of Kelsey or bust. Maybe if I get Darren Waller at a good value, if he slips, I'll consider it. But I haven't been in a position to do that so far in some early drafts. But I think what you're trying to do is what you look at is taking two guys who I think have upside, whether it be Blake Jarwin, Jonnu Smith, Tyler Higbee. I think that's the grouping. Cole Kmet, I think, is a very impressive young prospect too.
yes.
I loved him at Notre Dame. I thought he was a matchup disaster. And you saw the snap count go up for Cole Kmet over the second part of the year. And you could see, Jimmy Graham's another year older. Some really decent quarterback play would go a long way with Cole Kmet. And let's not forget, too, when Andy Dalton was in peak Andy Dalton, Red Rifle, Tyler Eifert caught a ton
Yes,
of
did he ever?
touchdowns. Did he ever? It's pretty much all he did. That's good enough for me, Chris. You give me a Tyler Eifert profile, Cole Kmet, and he's a free square on the board. I will take that shot all day. But those are the kind of tight ends I think you take two of them. You either play matchups or maybe you get a Jonnu Smith breakout. Look, he basically broke out last year. I see some drafts where Hunter Henry's going after him and
Oh my
before
goodness.
him, and I don't understand. It makes my head hurt. They went and signed Jonnu Smith. That's the guy they paid, and the Hunter Henry was just more just like, okay, let's get some more depth because they were the worst tight end football team in the history of football last year. They were so bad, the Pats, going from Rob Gronkowski to Izzo and Asiasi and some of these other guys were like, this is just dreadful. It was more of like a depth issue, and Hunter Henry is a nice player, but Hunter Henry is not Jonnu Smith. So those are the kind of guys and the approach I would take. But overall, the Rams, I think, are going to be a very good offense. The Akers injury hurts them because it hurts the balance. Let's see what other moves they make. But I think Stafford's in for a really great season too, and I really like him as a nice low end QB1 or as a tandem QB in Superflex. I think he can go way worse than Stafford. I think he is. It's like almost like you let him out of the prison, right? He's out of the cage, and now he's got a great opportunity to really succeed here.
Yeah, I think so too, man. And he doesn't have to do a whole lot either
Mm-hmm.
to like from an NFL standpoint, fantasy aside, he's got some weapons in McVay's offense and a decent offensive line and he doesn't have to do too much to win football games. Like this defense is legit. They're so
Mm-hmm.
good. At last year stopping the run and stopping the pass, best football team through the air at stopping the pass and then stopping the run as well, just right there. They get some guys who of course can get after the quarterback. Man, I dude, this is why we're always on the same page and it's just like seems like a just pleasant conversation when you just I'm not into Higby at all. And all those tight ends
Yeah,
that
I
you
don't get
mentioned,
it.
I have Cole Kmet ranked aggressively, like maybe too high, like tight
No,
end
I
13.
do too. I do too, but I think you see the same thing see in Cole Kmet, which is the quarterback upgrade already is just substantial, even if it's just Dalton, not even Fields. But don't you see the same thing where okay, it's the first year of a tight end, and you see like, well, okay, it didn't work out for Hawkinson year one or Fant year one, all those guys, but you give me the free tight end who could get right into that range. Well, why would I draft anybody before then?
Right. And for Trotman, I mean, this guy's moving up. 152 I'm seeing here last 2 weeks. A min pick of 85. Like, come on, I'm not doing that. Tight end 17. And then Komet is 19, min pick of 129, so you can get him even later, ADP of 167. To your point, Hunter Henry is going slightly ahead of Jonnu Smith over the past couple weeks. I have Henry outside of my top 20. I think Jonnu is the guy there for sure. Not into Tanya, not into Ingram, not into Troutman,
No,
maybe. Yeah, not. I think the one guy that we haven't
Jarwin's a
mentioned,
guy too.
Jarwin. I like Jarwin, and maybe Ferkser, but I don't know if he can be a starting tight end for you. But I do like
Mm.
him. What about Gerald Everett? We had a conversation the other day about the Seahawks and their different offense.
Yeah,
What do you think about
intrigued.
him?
I mean, ever since Jimmy Graham left, it's been a carousel there of
It
tight
has,
ends,
yeah.
right? I mean, how many guys? I mean, Disley and this guy and that guy, and then they all get hurt. And you saw Greg Olson there. I mean, they were
Yeah.
really like trying to find something. Everett, I think, has a unique opportunity. It's just how much they're going to use him in this offense. And the other thing too is this is an offense that didn't really attack over the middle of the field very much, and maybe it's mostly because they didn't have the tight end to do that. So that's something that would really do well for this team. Now, maybe Dwayne Eskridge becomes that guy playing out of the slot. Maybe that can help too. But Everett at least has an opportunity. I still have Johnu well above him, Cole Komet, Jarwin. Like that group
Yes.
really is appealing to me. And the reason why I'm always kind of pumping the brakes on Higby also is, I understand Everett was there with him last year, but I also just look at that wide receiving core and there's so much talent there that tight end almost becomes like a specific matchup play for them. It's like, oh, okay, well, you know what? These guys are really good corners. Maybe it's a Tyler Higbee day. More of a DFS play than it is necessarily a season-long investment in a player. I just don't see the weekly floor. I see the ceiling potentially on certain given weeks and matchups, but in terms of the floor, I don't know. I kind of struggle with that. Whereas I look at some of these other guys we're talking about here, and grabbing two of these guys and either playing matchups or maybe you get a full breakout, they can all of a sudden become something pretty special. I mean, Dalton Schultz last year, right? Remember, Hayden Hurst was
Oh
a guy
yeah.
last year everybody was super high on. The Hayden Hurst breakout is going to be unbelievable. He was okay, but Dalton Schultz was basically 3 points behind him. And who knew even who Dalton Schultz's name was last year going into the season?
Right. And he stepped in and he was very, very productive. I like the Van Jefferson call, wide receiver 78 over the past couple weeks, ADP 226, not going to cost you a whole lot. So it's something like you said towards the end of the season. Sean Jackson, no chance, wide receiver 90, 263, and then Tutu Atwell, wide receiver 164, ADP 301. So just kind of to finish up this Rams talk, like Robert Woods, and he's gaining steam. He does seem to be the guy that's the clear path for targets. Cup has had the injuries. Cup had the connection with Jared Goff. He has been the red zone guy in this offense over the past couple of years. Robert Woods in a PPR setting, I get the appeal, but I mean, for me, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this range. If you're picking here around pick 39, Evans, like CeeDee Lamb, Evans, Woods, Cooper, Godwin. What about Julio Jones? Like about a
Oh
minute.
well,
Like, what about
forget.
Julio? I love this where he's going in draft.
Julio's a top 10 wide receiver still
Yes.
in my book. Literally in my book. You can buy on Amazon. And the reason is, like, I understand last year it was difficult because the injuries finally caught up with him and he missed time. He's always been a guy who's been hurt, but he's played through. He didn't play through last year. Okay. The best case scenario for Julio Jones at this stage in his career, I think, is to play with another alpha wide receiver who's younger than him, who takes pressure off of him. You're putting him with A.J. Brown and in a situation where Tannehill is a pretty good quarterback, much better than he gets credit for. You have safeties who, if you bring up the safety to help with the run with Derrick Henry, you're going to leave all of those two guys in single coverage. Good luck with that. This is a real matchup problem for opposing defenses that the Tennessee Titans are going to pose. And I think this is the perfect point and juncture in his career. And Calvin Ridley's great, don't get me wrong, and he kind of had that going there in Atlanta, but he kind of needs that, I think, to continue to be productive. But if you're reading some of the reports about maybe Taysom Hill is going to be the quarterback, like, how could you not like Julio Jones more than Michael Thomas in that scenario? I just, you have to at a certain point. And you mentioned about Robert Woods. I would absolutely rather have Julio Jones. And it's not a knock on Robert Woods. It's just
No.
it's Julio Jones is a transcendent, wonderful
Thing.
player,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think that those guys being together is going to be death because AJ Brown has always been the most economical wide receiver in the NFL for the last 2 years. It's the one thing people used to knock him for, right, Chris? Oh, he's so good, but he's so economical. He makes the most of what's going on. Well, if he just continues to do that with Julio Jones on the other side, he could be a top 3 wide receiver when all said and done. So you're right. Julio's being grossly undervalued right now.
I think they're both top 10 wideouts. I wouldn't be shocked if Julio finished ahead of AJ Brown. I got Tannehill as a borderline QB1 as well. I like the setup, right? To your point, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you're going to stack the box, then you got to just deal with those two guys. And Tannehill's got a decent deep arm. The play action just sets up perfectly. You got to be excited for a Titans fan. And on the flip side, the defense is not that great.
Mm-hmm.
They had issues last year getting after the quarterback, generating any pressure in the secondary. They lost some pieces, so it could be just maybe more passes, more attempts, and maybe more efficiency, and not 380 carries or whatever Henry had last season. But I like all 4 of the weapons inside that offense. I want to get your thoughts on maybe a couple underrated players, a couple targets, maybe a couple guys that you have ranked higher than others in the industry. And of course, you are the value king, man. So stick around for one more segment, and we will talk about a couple of those players. Keep her locked. Meaney and Joe Pisapia here with you on Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with us. I wanted to get thoughts on just some players that Joe's feeling here. He writes a lot in that book, the Fantasy Black Book, but also the overrated and underrated section, which you took part in.
Mm-hmm.
And give me a guy. Give me a guy that you like, that you seem to like more than the ADP or more than the industry here.
Well, look, I'm very pro CeeDee Lamb. I was very pro CeeDee Lamb last year, had all the shares. It looked really good for the first month of the season. And then, unfortunately, Dak Prescott's injury kind of, killed it a little bit. But he was still pretty darn good regardless, which says a lot about him. So very bullish on him. What I'm always trying to look for, and it's something we try to do in the book every single year, is find the guys who are going to jump, right? The guys who are going to go from wide receiver 2s to wide receiver 1s. The guys who go from wide receiver 3s to wide receiver 2s. If you can identify those guys who can jump, and we've done a very good job of that in our track record the last few years. Last year, it was Calvin Ridley and DK Metcalf, right, who were being drafted as wide receiver 2s that we said could be 1s. Well, that worked out pretty well. The year before, it was Godwin and DJ Moore. That worked out pretty well. This year, it's CeeDee Lamb, and the other guy is T. Higgins, which, even though Jamar Chase is there, in a way, it's suppressed T. Higgins now so much, where he's going as like wide receiver 28, 29, and that is just absurd. Because there's still enough here with how terrible this Bengals defense is going to be with Joe Burrow throwing the football to all of these guys. So I think that yes, it caps him a certain amount, but I still think T. Higgins is a guy that, with all the Jamar Chase and rightfully so, all the attention going there, there's still enough for T. Higgins to realize and still be very good. So those are 2 wide receivers I think, once again, can make a jump. And if you're looking for a 3 to a 2, Jerry Jeudy, statistically speaking, this guy creates separation. Drops are something you can obviously work on. He did have a lot of drops last year. I get it. But he also had a lot of crappy quarterback play. If Bridgewater plays, I think he's going to be in a better spot this year to, where the ball is placed also has a lot to do with whether or not you catch it. Somewhere on him, somewhere on luck. but on lock last year, excuse me. But I think you can find kind of maybe a happy medium where it regresses a little bit to the mean, and you get Jerry Jeudy, maybe the best version of this year.
You think Teddy Bridgewater is a quarterback there for the majority of the season?
I do.
I do too.
I think we saw enough from Drew Lock last year that if it wasn't Drew Lock was too big to fail last year, and it still failed. So
Yeah.
what else are you doing here? You might as well go and try to play Teddy Bridgewater and see what happens. And obviously continue to look for your next quarterback in the future. Teddy Bridgewater was pretty capable last year for the Carolina Panthers. And you're giving him a lot of good weapons here, a lot to use. You take a lot of pressure off him. He's got two running backs in this offense that are very viable. I think it's going to be Bridgewater, I do. That's the way I would be going into the season.
Yeah, Tino and I, we did a startup dynasty super flex, and I don't know, I think it was like quarterback 4 or something for me. They were both sitting there, Luck and
Yeah.
Bridgewater, and I went Bridgewater. Just I don't expect to play Bridgewater this year. If things go wrong for me, then Bridgewater's in my lineup, but I lean him a little bit more. I like Judy too. I'm not worried about the drops, man. In terms of air yards, we got a free tool over at ftnfantasy.com, ftndaily.com. Air yards, he was among the leaders, getting opportunity, creating separation. To your point, he never really dropped balls in college. I expect him to clean that up. It's just one season. I don't think he's going to be that type of guy. For Higgins, he has closed the gap on Jamar Chase. You know, last
Yeah.
year as wide receiver 28, NFFC over the last 2 weeks, ADP 57, wide receiver 25. So Jamar really hasn't moved. He's at 55, and he's been at 55 for like 6 weeks now. He moved early on, but his ADP has kind of stayed the course. Where Higgins has kind of closed the gap on him. I have him as wide receiver 26. He led the Bengals in air yards and target share last year, 28.8 air yards and 21.7 target share. And Joe Burrow, 40.4 passing attempts per game, just behind Big Ben at 40.5. Wide receiver 26 through week 11 with Joe Burrow under center before that injury. One more guy I wanted to get your thoughts on because there seems to be a divide in the fantasy community. That is David Montgomery, RB4 in PPR and half point settings last year. 1,000 yards on the ground, 71 per game, 4.3 yards per pop, 8 TDs, 54 catches on 68 targets. 1,500-yard season from him. Really good. First 7 games, 19 or fewer carries in all of them, 12.8 carries per game. It took some time. It seems like it's taken Matt Nagy some time with a lot of things over the past couple of years, but he realized to get the ball to Montgomery. Of course, injuries helped Montgomery a little bit, but the final 8 games, Joe, 18.8 carries per game, 21, at least 21 in 4 of those games, 32-1. He finished really strong. This is where it kind of gets murky for people, I think. 9 catches through the first 4 games, 45 through his next 11. RB4 from week 4 on. RB4 overall, 40 points behind Derrick Henry overall, but 10 points behind Derrick Henry from week 4 on in a PPR setting because of some of the catches that he's had. What do you think happens here with Damian Williams on this roster, with Tariq Coleman coming back? Like, what is a fair projection for him catches? Can he catch 40 balls?
Yeah, I think he can. I absolutely think he can, especially because you mentioned that he didn't catch any for the first few weeks of the season, right? So why is it so hard for him to recreate this season? I don't know. I'm struggling with this. People hate David Montgomery because he is not as exciting to watch as Saquon Barkley. Okay, you're right. He absolutely isn't. But can we give this guy a little bit of love? I mean, he's going to be playing with better quarterbacks as well. So that's good because there's more scoring potential, number one. Number two, it also opens up the field a little bit more, keeps defenses honest. And people keep, they keep being negative about Montgomery because, well, he was so good down the stretch and it was against some bad teams. Well, you know what? So what? As long as you're performing, how about let's beat up on the bad teams? How many guys fail in matchups that they should succeed? Let's 100%. Not knock this guy for being good when he was supposed to. I think that's a stupid thing to do. So for me, David Montgomery is greatly undervalued. He is a perfect guy if you want to double tap wide receiver. Like you'll say you're in the 10, 11, 12 spot and you go with Diggs and Hopkins, right? And you can come back and get a Chris Carson and David Montgomery. I will go to war with that any day of the week. I know the role of these guys. I understand there's a cap, there's a ceiling limit to David Montgomery. But there's also a much healthier floor than I think he's getting credit for. And everybody's always more intrigued by the upside of Antonio Gibson, guys like Cam Akers. Obviously now he's out of the mix. Let's not forget about a guy who's just getting it done. And David Montgomery, I think, could be that workhorse. I don't want to hear about Tariq Cohen anymore. I'm over it. I mean, how many years are we going to fall for the same nonsense?
Right.
It's just not that great, and he can't stay on the field. So enough is enough. Give me Montgomery.
And I think what they realized, right, it just kind of happened. Like maybe they wouldn't give all those targets to Montgomery last year if Tariq Cohen was hanging around, but nobody was really running more routes than Dave Montgomery after Cohen went out. And it's like,
and I bet they're glad they did.
Here. Yeah,
I bet they're
exactly.
glad they did after all that. You know what? They were like, wow, we really made a mistake here. We should have been throwing this guy the football the whole time. Things are going much better. They almost snuck in the playoffs last year.
I know, they really did. Yeah. And so for me, we'll finish this up. I had him as a top 10 running back in his rookie season, and that was totally wrong. But
Mhm.
I think a lot of people were just in on him. It didn't get the opportunity. The skill set was there, and now you're starting to see it in year three. I love where he's going in drafts. I have already have a lot of shares of him, and I think I'm going to continue to get some shares of him. It's just like if you, it's not the zero RB, but like a moderate zero RB, or
Right.
even double tap wide receiver, or you get Kelsey in there. I think he could make for a low end RB1, at least upside to be a low end
Agreed.
RB1. Dude, fantastic always to chat with you. And when the season starts, man, I'd love to get you in the rotation here. Again, Joe Pisapia is 17. Check out all of his podcasts over at Fantasy Pros, and more importantly, do yourself a favor and check out the Fantasy Black Book, a 16-time best-selling Fantasy Black Book series. Appreciate the time, dude.